Most people think the worst feeling in the world is walking into a quiet house after a long trip. I used to think that too. Now I know better. The real nightmare is opening your front door and realizing something inside your life shifted while you were gone. Something ugly enough that your instincts catch it before your mind does. After 24 years of marriage, I knew my wife better than I knew myself. You don't spend that long beside someone without learning the tiny things, the way their footsteps sound when they're tired, the difference between a real smile and one they force because they don't want to worry you, the strange tension that hangs in the air when something is wrong. That Wednesday afternoon, I felt it before I even parked my car. I wasn't supposed to be home yet. My business seminar in Phoenix ended early because the guest speaker had some kind of family emergency. Personally, I think the guy looked out at a ballroom full of exhausted executives and decided disappearing was a better option. Either way, I caught the first flight back to Virginia. I didn't call my wife, Naomi. I wanted to surprise her. I even stopped to grab takeout from that little Thai place she loved downtown. I was in a good mood for the first time in weeks. Work had been brutal lately, and Naomi and I barely sat down together anymore without one of us checking emails every 3 minutes. I should have known life doesn't reward optimism that easily. The first thing that hit me was seeing my son's SUV parked in my driveway. Now, my son, Colton, was 27 years old, married for 3 years to a woman named Sierra. They had a condo across the city that I helped pay for because, apparently, modern furniture costs the same as a small yacht now. Colton wasn't the type to randomly visit. Honestly, most of the time, Naomi had to guilt him into showing up for dinner. So seeing his vehicle outside my house in the middle of a weekday immediately felt wrong. I sat there behind the steering wheel staring at it. Then I actually said out loud, "Elliot, why is your son here?" No answer came, obviously. Just that awful feeling crawling higher in my chest. I grabbed my suitcase and walked toward the house. That was when I noticed the silence. Not peaceful silence, not the comfortable kind. This silence felt thick, heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. The second I stepped inside, I saw them. Colton and Sierra were sitting on the couch together in the living room. And listen carefully, because this was the moment everything changed for me. Neither of them looked surprised, not even a little. Think about that. Your father is supposed to be halfway across the country, and instead he walks through the front door a full day early. A normal person reacts. A normal son stands up and says, "Dad, what are you doing home?" Colton didn't. He just looked at me calmly, too calmly. Sierra smiled, but there was something wrong with it. It looked rehearsed, like she'd practiced being reassuring in a mirror. I set my suitcase down slowly. "Where is your mother?" I asked. Colton cleared his throat. "Dad, we were actually about to call you." "Were you?" I said. Flat, cold, not a question. He glanced toward Sierra before answering. "Mom got sick this morning. She's at St. Matthew Medical Center, but the doctor said she's stable." That was all I heard. The rest disappeared under the sound of blood rushing in my ears. I was back in my car less than 15 seconds later. Shock does strange things to a person. Your brain grabs onto pointless details, while the important ones tear through your chest. I remember noticing my gas tank was half full. I remember realizing one of my windshield wipers needed replacing. I also remember driving 90 miles an hour through traffic without caring if I got arrested. On the way there, I called my best friend. Grant Mercer had been in my life since college. That man had seen me through layoffs, family disasters, and the unforgettable tragedy of my attempt at growing long hair in my 40s. He answered immediately. "Elliot, Naomi is in the hospital." Silence. Then, "What happened?" "I don't know, but Colton and Sierra were sitting in my house like they already knew how this ends." Another silence, longer this time. Then Grant spoke carefully. "What do you mean?" "I mean my son didn't react when he saw me. Grant, I was supposed to be in Phoenix." I heard him exhale slowly. "Elliot, stay calm." "I am calm." "No, you're driving. That's not the same thing." He wasn't wrong. The hospital was 20 minutes away.
I made it in 11. I'm not proud of that, but I'm also not apologizing for it. A doctor named Dr. Valerie Monroe met me near the nurses' station. She looked like one of those people who had delivered terrible news so many times she learned how to keep her emotions locked behind professionalism. Steady eyes, steady voice. Exactly what I needed right then. "Mr. Bennett, I'm glad you got here quickly. How's my wife?" "She's stable right now, but we're concerned about several things." Concerned. That word nearly stopped my heart. Dr. Monroe explained that Naomi had arrived disoriented and severely dehydrated. Her kidneys were under stress. Her blood work showed elevated toxicity levels. "Toxicity?" I repeated. "Yes," she said carefully. "We're still running tests, but this doesn't appear to be a sudden illness. Whatever caused this seems to have developed gradually over time." Gradually. That word hit me harder than anything else she said. I grabbed the counter beside me. "Doctor, are you telling me somebody's been doing something to my wife?" She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she answered in the most controlled voice imaginable. "I'm telling you, I think there are questions that need answers." I walked into Naomi's room feeling like I was moving underwater, and nothing prepared me for seeing her like that. I had seen my wife furious, laughing, exhausted, stressed, joyful, heartbroken, stubborn, impossible, beautiful, terrifying, and everything in between over 2 decades together. But I had never seen her look empty. That's the only word for it. Empty. The woman who once threatened a roofing contractor with garden shears for overcharging us now looked fragile enough to disappear into those hospital sheets. Machines beeped softly around her, an IV dripped beside the bed, and my wife looked so small it physically hurt to breathe. I sat beside her and took her hand. Then I made a promise. "I'm here, and I'm not leaving until I know exactly what happened to you." When I stepped back into the waiting area, Colton and Sierra were already there. Of course they were. Colton stood the second I saw him coming. "Dad, we should talk." I raised one hand. That was it, just one hand, but something in my face must have warned him not to keep going, because he stopped talking immediately. "Not now," I said. Then I walked to the far end of the waiting room, pulled out my phone, and started doing the one thing they never expected me to do that night. I locked every account they could touch. Every single one. Savings accounts, joint emergency funds, credit access, transfer permissions, everything. The beautiful thing about modern banking is panic travels fast. Within seconds, their phones started lighting up, and I watched Sierra first.
That fake calm expression vanished so quickly it was almost impressive. There it is, I thought. There's the real reaction. That was the exact moment I understood something terrible. Whatever was happening to Naomi, I had just disrupted their plan. The question was how big that plan really was. I spent most of the night sitting in that hospital waiting room drinking coffee that tasted like burnt dirt and trying not to lose my mind. Around 10 that night, I called Grant again. He answered before the first ring finished. "How bad?" I rubbed my face hard enough to hurt. "She looks awful." My voice cracked on the last word, which I will deny publicly until the day I die. Grant stayed quiet. "The doctor said toxicity levels," I continued. "Not sudden, something gradual." He inhaled sharply. "Gradual means intentional, Elliot. I know what it means." The words came out colder than I intended. "And Colton and Sierra were sitting in my house waiting when I got home." Silence again. Then Grant lowered his voice. "You need to think carefully about who had access to Naomi every day." That sentence hit me like a hammer, because suddenly something from months earlier snapped into place. 4 months before all this, Naomi had sprained her ankle coming down the back steps during a rainstorm. Nothing life-threatening, but bad enough that she struggled getting around for a while. Colton immediately volunteered Sierra to help out during mornings while I was at work. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Sierra worked part-time and had flexible hours. She started stopping by every morning to help Naomi with breakfast, medications, vitamins, whatever she needed. I actually remember telling Grant back then, maybe our son turned out better than I thought.
I wanted to travel back through time and punch myself in the throat. I went back inside the hospital. Colton was standing beside a vending machine, pretending to look relaxed. He failed spectacularly. Sierra sat nearby with her phone face down in her lap. Now, understand something important. That woman lived on her phone. I once watched her scroll social media during Grace at Thanksgiving dinner, so seeing her place it face down meant one of two things. Either she was hiding something, or she was waiting for a message she didn't want me seeing. I sat directly across from them. Colton leaned forward. "Dad, I know how this looks." "Do you?" I asked quietly. "Because I'm genuinely curious how you think this looks." He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom's been struggling for months. We were helping her." "With what?" "Making sure she ate, took her supplements, stuff like that." "Supplements." I repeated the word slowly. "Which supplements?" He blinked. "What? Which ones, Colton?" He looked toward Sierra. Sierra looked down at the floor. And that tiny little exchange told me everything. Everything. 3 seconds of silence destroyed 27 years of trust. I stood up. "I need both of you to leave." "Dad, go home." I said it quietly, the same way my father used to speak when I was 1 sentence away from ruining my life. Colton stared at me for a moment. Then he nodded once. Sierra grabbed her purse without saying a word. The second they left, I sat back down and started digging. If there's one thing age teaches you, it's this. People hide lies emotionally, but money tells the truth. I pulled up 6 months of account records. Now, let me be honest with you. I'm not some financial genius. I'm a 55-year-old man who still mistrusts automatic bill pay and occasionally forgets passwords written down in front of him. But even I could see something was wrong. Small withdrawals. $200 here, $400 there, $300 somewhere else. The amounts were clever because they didn't scream, they whispered. But when I added them together, my stomach dropped. Nearly $13,000 gone over 5 months. From the household emergency account Naomi and I shared, an account Colton had limited access to strictly for emergencies. I stared at the total for a long time. Then I called Grant at 2 in the morning. He answered instantly. "How much?" "Almost 13 grand. Jesus." "Small withdrawals," I said, "spread out, like somebody trying not to get noticed." Grant was quiet. Then he said something that chilled me. "That's not impulsive, Elliot. That's organized." I leaned back in the plastic hospital chair and closed my eyes. My son planned this. "We don't know that yet." "Yes," I whispered. "I think we do." The next morning, Dr. Monroe found me exactly where she'd left me the night before, still in the waiting room, still wearing the same clothes, still looking like hell. She sat beside me carefully. The toxicology results came back. I braced myself. "Tell me straight." She nodded once. "Your wife has elevated levels of a heavy metal compound consistent with long-term exposure. The concentration suggests repeated ingestion over several months." I felt my pulse pounding in my throat. "She's going to recover?" "We believe so," she said quickly. "We caught it in time." Caught it in time. God. I swallowed hard. Then I asked the question I already knew the answer to. If someone did this intentionally, how would they administer it? Dr. Monroe paused before answering. "Food, drinks, powder-based supplements, anything consumed regularly." Supplements. Sierra bringing Naomi vitamins every morning. My hands started shaking. Dr. Monroe touched my arm gently. "Mr. Bennett, I need to make a few calls." The first call went to my attorney. The second went to the bank. Within 20 minutes, every remaining account was frozen, restructured, password protected, and stripped of Colton's access. Every pathway closed, every door locked. Then my phone exploded. 4 missed calls from Colton, 2 from Sierra. Finally, a text arrived. "Dad, what did you do? Why can't I access the accounts? Call me immediately." Immediately, all caps. I stared at the message for a long time. Just 3 months earlier, that same boy hugged me at Christmas and told me I was the best father he could ever ask for. And I believed him. God help me, I believed him completely. Finally, I typed 1 sentence back. "You should have thought about that before you touched my wife." Then I put my phone away and went back upstairs to sit beside Naomi, because she was all that mattered now. But somewhere deep inside me, something had changed. The fear was still there, the grief too, but underneath both of them, something colder had started growing. Because poisoned wives and stolen money don't happen without a reason. People don't plan something this carefully unless they expect a reward at the end. I just didn't know what the reward was yet. Late that evening, I called Grant again. He answered immediately. "How's Naomi?" "Stable," I said. "The treatment is helping." Thank God. I stared through the hospital window into the dark parking lot below. Then I lowered my voice. "I need you to find out if Naomi changed anything recently." "What kind of thing?" "A will, insurance policies, trusts, anything involving money." Grant didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Elliot, you think this is financial?" I laughed once. It didn't sound human. "I think my son stole $13,000 from us without blinking. So yes, I think money's involved." Grant exhaled slowly. "I'll make some calls." I didn't sleep that night. Honestly, I'm not sure I slept for the next 4 days. Hospital time isn't normal time.
It becomes this strange, suspended reality where hours disappear and every sound feels too loud. Monitors beep, shoes squeak across polished floors, coffee tastes terrible no matter how much cream you dump into it. And somewhere in the middle of all that, your entire life changes shape. The next morning, at exactly 7:11, my phone rang. Grant. The second I answered, he said, "You need to sit down." I already was. "Tell me." There was a pause before he spoke again. 6 weeks ago, Naomi met privately with an estate attorney. I frowned. For what? She updated her life insurance policy. My chest tightened immediately. Years ago, when Colton was still young, Naomi and I had listed him as the secondary beneficiary on a policy worth a little over $2 million. Standard family planning, nothing unusual. Grant continued carefully. She was removing Colton completely. I went completely still. What? She redirected everything into a charitable literacy foundation she'd been quietly building. That sounded exactly like Naomi. My wife never did anything halfway. If she planned a birthday dinner, she turned it into a 3-day operation. If she donated to charity, she researched organizations like she was preparing for congressional hearings. Apparently, she'd spent almost 2 years building a literacy program for underprivileged kids without telling me, because she wanted it fully operational before surprising me with it. That was Naomi. Always planning, always building, always giving. Grant's voice softened. The policy was worth $2.4 million. I closed my eyes, and suddenly everything snapped together so hard it made me feel physically sick. Colton found out. I still don't know how. Maybe he overheard something. Maybe he saw paperwork. Maybe Sierra snooped through files while helping around the house. Honestly, it didn't matter. What mattered was this. My son learned he was about to lose access to millions of dollars. And instead of acting like a man, instead of confronting his mother, instead of having one difficult conversation, he and his wife decided Naomi shouldn't survive long enough to finalize the paperwork. The attorney explained there was a 30-day processing period before the changes became official. Naomi collapsed with exactly 30 days left. 30 days. I sat there in that hospital chair, staring at nothing for what felt like hours. Eventually, I stood up, walked to the waiting room window, and made a decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to lose control, and I sure as hell wasn't going to confront Colton emotionally and let him spin this into confusion. No, I was going to bury him carefully, methodically, completely. I called my attorney. Her name was Rebecca Hale, and if consequences had a physical form, they would probably look and sound exactly like Rebecca Hale. That woman had spent 30 years dismantling liars for a living. I told her everything. The supplements, the withdrawals, the insurance policy, the timeline, every ugly piece of it. She listened without interrupting once. Then she said, "Do not confront them." "I won't." "Do not touch anything in the house." "Okay." "Do not post online. Do not threaten them. Do not warn them." "I understand." Her voice sharpened. "Good, because when this lands, Mr. Bennett, I intend for it to land completely." I stared down the hallway toward Naomi's room. I want them to feel all of it. Rebecca actually chuckled. Oh, they will. The next 72 hours dragged by like years, but Naomi improved.
Slowly, painfully, steadily. Dr. Monroe told me her kidney function was stabilizing. The treatments were working. Then the second morning, Naomi finally opened her eyes fully, and the first thing my wife said to me after nearly dying was, "Elliot, you look awful." I laughed so hard a nurse actually looked concerned. Maybe I sounded insane. Maybe I was insane by then, but hearing Naomi's sarcasm again felt like somebody restarting my heart. I leaned closer to her bed. "You're in intensive care and criticizing me?" Her voice was weak and rough. "Someone has to." I grabbed her hand and held onto it like I'd never let go again. I didn't tell her everything yet. She needed strength first. But I did tell her 3 things. "You're safe." She squeezed my hand weakly. "I know what happened." Her eyes opened a little wider. "And I'm handling it." She studied my face for a long moment. Even exhausted and hooked to machines, Naomi still had those sharp eyes that always saw straight through me. Then she whispered something that nearly broke me. "It was Colton, wasn't it?" Not a question, a statement. I couldn't answer. I just held her hand tighter. Naomi closed her eyes slowly. Then she said very quietly, "I always knew that boy inherited my worst traits and none of my best ones." Even half-conscious in a hospital bed, my wife remained the strongest person I had ever known. On the 4th day, Rebecca called me with news that made my blood run cold. Grant had managed to obtain surveillance footage from a pharmacy 2 towns away. Over 4 months, Colton had purchased the same supplement brand 3 different times, always paying cash, always alone, except once. During the 3rd visit, Sierra was visible waiting in the SUV outside. The supplement contained trace elements matching the compound found in Naomi's blood. Rebecca also had the bank records, the withdrawal history, the timeline. But then she told me something so unbelievably stupid it almost made me laugh. Apparently, Colton had actually called the estate attorney's office pretending to be Naomi's assistant to ask about the insurance update. And he left his own cell phone number for the callback. His own number. I stared at the wall for a solid 10 seconds after hearing that. Finally, I said, "Rebecca, did I raise a criminal mastermind or a complete idiot?" She answered instantly. Disturbingly, I think the answer is both. On the 5th day, Colton and Sierra came to the hospital together carrying flowers. Flowers. Like this was some ordinary family crisis they could smile their way through. The second I saw them walking down the hallway, I understood exactly what they were trying to do. Charm, damage control, last-minute acting. Colton spotted me near the elevators and immediately forced on that polished smile he used whenever he wanted something. "Dad," he said carefully, "how's Mom doing?" I looked at him for a long moment, then at Sierra, then back at him. "She's awake, talking too. Doctors expect a full recovery." And there it was, that tiny flicker. Not relief, not happiness, calculation. A quick adjustment behind his eyes like a man realizing a plan had failed and scrambling to figure out the next move. Sierra stepped forward with the flowers clasped tightly in both hands. "That's wonderful news, Elliot." I nodded once. "It is." Then I added quietly, "The police are on their way." Silence. Absolute silence. Colton's face lost color so fast it almost impressed me. "What?" I kept my voice level. "Rebecca Hale submitted everything this morning. The pharmacy footage, financial records, toxicology reports, insurance documentation, phone logs, all neatly organized." Sierra made a small choking sound beside him. Colton immediately stepped closer. "Dad, wait. Just listen to me for 1 second, okay? Please, just—" I cut him off. "No."
For the first time in his life, my son looked genuinely scared of me. "There is nothing you can say right now," I continued quietly. "There is not a sentence in the English language capable of fixing this." His mouth opened again. I raised one finger, and he closed it. "The flowers are nice, though," I said. "I'm sure someone else will appreciate them." Hospital security arrived first, then 2 detectives, then uniformed officers. Rebecca had coordinated the timing with terrifying precision. Colton tried talking immediately because my son always believed his greatest weapon was his voice. Excuses poured out of him before anyone even asked questions. Misunderstanding, stress, financial pressure, accident. He used every word except the truth. Sierra stayed silent.
completely silent. And honestly, that frightened me more. Because silence meant calculation. She was already thinking ahead. Deals, plea bargains, reduced sentences, survival. The officers escorted them downstairs through the parking garage. I watched from the corridor window. They were still holding the flowers when the handcuffs came out. Grant appeared beside me so quietly I nearly jumped. I didn't even know he'd arrived. That man always had a way of materializing exactly when life got unbearable. We stood there together, watching everything unfold below us. After a while, he asked softly, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. Then I answered, "Like I aged 15 years this week." He nodded. "Anything else?" I kept staring out the glass. "Like I want to sleep for a month." Then, after a pause, "And like I've never been this heartbroken in my entire life." Grant rested one hand on my shoulder. "What about Naomi?" At that, I turned and looked down the hallway toward her room. Through the small rectangular window in the door, I could see her lying there under the dim hospital lights, alive, still here, still fighting. And suddenly, that became the only thing that mattered. "Naomi's going to be okay," I said quietly. "She was always going to survive this." Grant smiled faintly. "She is terrifyingly strong. You have no idea." I looked back toward the parking garage, where officers were loading Colton into a police vehicle. My wife once made a grown contractor cry because he installed the wrong kitchen tile. Grant laughed unexpectedly, a real laugh, the kind that breaks tension for half a second, and for the first time all week, I felt the crushing weight on my chest lift just enough for me to breathe. 3 months later, Naomi came home. It was a Saturday morning in October. The sunlight coming through the windows had that soft golden color fall only gives you for a few weeks every year. I stood beside the doorway watching her slowly step inside our house again. She stopped in the hallway and looked around silently. Not dramatically, just quietly, taking inventory of everything she almost lost. Then she pointed toward the kitchen walls and said, "This room needs repainting." I stared at her. "You almost died." "Yes. And your first concern is paint?" "It's the wrong shade of white. There are like 4 whites." "There are hundreds," she corrected immediately. I sighed heavily. "That wall is white." Naomi narrowed her eyes at it. "No, that wall is the color of government disappointment." I looked at the wall, then at my wife. Then I pulled out my phone and called a painter. Some battles are unwinnable. Colton and Sierra were charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and financial crimes. Rebecca handled the prosecution process with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed watching terrible people collapse under evidence. The trial lasted 11 days. The jury deliberated less than 5 hours. I won't tell you the sentence, because honestly, no number would have felt long enough for me. What I will tell you is this. When the verdict was read, Naomi was sitting beside me, gripping my hand so tightly it hurt, and the second it was over, she leaned toward me and whispered, "I want Thai food." I blinked. "Right now?" She looked offended I even asked. "Elliot, I have spent 3 months thinking about Thai food. Do not challenge me on this." So we got Thai food. Grant came, Rebecca came, even Dr. Monroe showed up after Naomi insisted on inviting her. We sat around that table laughing while Naomi waved her hands dramatically telling some terrible story about terrible hospital coffee. And halfway through listening to her, I had one overwhelming thought. There she is. There's my wife, the woman I almost lost. At the beginning of all this, I thought the worst thing imaginable was walking into a house that should have been empty. I was wrong. I'm grateful I came home early. I'm grateful I saw what I saw, because if my conference had lasted one more day, if my flight had been delayed one more night, if I'd stayed away one more night, Naomi wouldn't have survived, and I would have spent the rest of my life never understanding why. Do you know what the hardest part is? It's not losing faith in strangers. It's realizing the people you love most are still capable of darkness when nobody's watching. You cannot control what people become behind closed doors. You can only decide what you'll do when the truth finally steps into the light. I came home early. I saw the truth, and I made sure every person responsible faced exactly what they'd done. If this story pulled you in, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Real stories, raw emotions, family secrets, betrayal, revenge, and justice served exactly the way it should be. Drop a comment below and tell us what you would have done in Elliot's place. And remember, sometimes the people closest to you hide the darkest intentions. Stay sharp, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next story.